This goddamn Joker guy, man, what? He's shooting like, did they say in like the last 5 or 6 games, he's shooting like 77% from the field?
Yeah, I mean, this season in 3 weeks, I think he's at 67% from the field.
Oh my good. And by the way, and this is not like one of those guys back in the day, like all dunks, or all layups. No, this is everything.
All three
levels. All three levels. Wow.
There's a moment that keeps happening when I watch Denver play, and it's hard to describe without sounding a little dramatic, so bear with me. The game will be close. The other team looks organized. The crowd's into it. You glance up at the score and think, okay, this might get interesting. And then Jokic touches the ball a few times in a row. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. Just a couple of possessions where he makes decisions that feel final. Not explosive, not emotional. Just final. And 10 minutes later, the game is functionally over, even if the scoreboard hasn't caught up yet. That feeling, that slow realization, is what keeps pulling me back. Because it doesn't feel like domination the way we're used to seeing it. It feels like inevitability. Like gravity doing what gravity does, without needing applause. And that's the strange part. Someone playing basketball at this level should not feel routine. It should feel disruptive. It should hijack conversations. It should force consensus. Instead, Jokic exists in this odd limbo where everyone agrees he's incredible, but nobody quite treats him like the axis the league is currently spinning around. Which raises the uncomfortable question. How did the best player in the world become basketball's quietest argument? Let's get this out of the way early, because dancing around it is part of the problem. Nikola Jokić is the best player in the NBA right now. Not the most aesthetically pleasing, not the guy who looks best in slow-motion edits, not the player who dominates by overwhelming you with speed or vertical pop. The best. And the reason that statement still feels like it needs defending says more about how we evaluate greatness than it does about Jokic himself. Because when you strip away branding and expectations and what we've been trained to respond to emotionally, the on-court evidence stops being subtle very quickly. Here's a simple thought experiment. You're coaching a playoff team. Game 1 is tomorrow. You don't know what the series will look like yet, but you know the margins will be thin and possessions will matter. You need someone who can keep your offense functional even when the first option dies, when the second option stalls, when the play breaks down and the shot clock starts yelling at you. Who do you want making those decisions? That question doesn't care about highlight culture. It doesn't care about shoe deals. It cares about survival. And every honest answer eventually circles back to Jokic. Because he doesn't just create offense, he prevents chaos. He turns messy possessions into usable ones. He slows the game down without killing momentum. He makes the correct choice so often that defenders start second-guessing themselves before the ball even gets to him. That's not dominance you feel all at once. It's dominance that accumulates. One of the biggest misconceptions about Jokic is that he's passive. He isn't. He's selective. A good example of this could be when Anthony Edwards discusses with a reporter on how Jokic picked apart their offense.
I'm sorry, y'all. Hey, I was just telling Micah how this motherfucker knew the play that we was running.
That was crazy.
Bro.
Who? We have a spy on the bench, man.
Who knew it?
Jokic knew the play, but we didn't say anything.
He's pretty smart.
He knew the play better than us.
Which play was it?
Coming out of the timeout. Also, he knew the play. I think he knew the play better than us.
Which play? Like what the last time?
Man, when was that?
Huh?
When was that? When was it?
It was in the fourth, nigga. It was like 3 minutes left in the fourth.
After the timeout?
Yes, bro. It was right after the timeout. Me and Rudy lined up. This motherfucker say, hey, he's little. Me and Rudy looked at each other and said, how the fuck do we know? Because nobody said what we
didn't say nothing.
But I don't. That nigga cheat, bro.
Yeah, we gotta launch an investigation.
There's a difference between passive and selective, and it matters. Passivity avoids responsibility. Selectivity absorbs responsibility and redistributes it where it makes the most sense. Jokic does the latter at an absurdly high level. He knows when a shot matters and when it doesn't. He knows when a mismatch is real and when it's bait. He knows when a defender is committing too much attention and when they're pretending to. And because he's not rushing to prove anything, he forces the defense to reveal itself first. Take this play, for example. The opposing team chooses to double-team Jokic. You, the viewer, are thinking, well, looks to be a turnover. I don't see Jokic getting out of this one. All of a sudden, boom, a pass to an open teammate for a three. If you choose to double-team him, he will pass for an easy three-point or mid-range. But if you decide to let him off easy with one defender, well, unfortunately for you, Jokic will make that defender look like a rookie making their entrance to the league. That's where the control comes from. This is also why watching Jokic can feel underwhelming if you're waiting for fireworks. He doesn't announce takeovers. He doesn't spike energy. He just keeps playing the same way while the other team slowly realizes they've lost access to clean solutions. That consistency is disorienting. Most superstars oscillate. Jokic flattens the curve. And weirdly enough, that's part of why he still feels underestimated. You can see this tension play out every year when MVP discussions start heating up. On paper, Jokic's resume should make these conversations boring by now. Multiple MVPs, a championship, a finals MVP, advanced metrics that consistently place him in a category of his own. And yet, the debates keep restarting from scratch. Why? Because the conversation isn't actually about value anymore. It's about comfort, about how often voters are willing to reward the same kind of excellence before it starts feeling repetitive. That's not a basketball issue. That's a human one. Take the season Joel Embiid won MVP. Joel was phenomenal. That needs to be said clearly, without hedging. He was dominant as a scorer and impactful defensively. That season wasn't a fluke or a charity case. But Jokic was still orchestrating an offense that collapsed without him. He was still elevating teammates who looked dramatically different the moment he sat down. He was still producing efficiency numbers that broke models designed to normalize greatness. The difference wasn't performance, it was fatigue. Want another example? Take the most recent season when Shea won MVP. You tell me which stat line is better. 26.4 points, 12.4 rebounds, and 10.0 assists per game? Or 32.5 points, 4.8 rebounds, and 6.6 assists per game? Come on, this one is obvious. Shea had an MVP-level season, but only 3 players have ever averaged a triple-double during the entire season. Jokic is in that elite category as of last year. If Jokic didn't win 3 MVPs already, the player who averaged a triple-double wins that award 10 times out of 10. The problem is, people wanted variety. They wanted a new story. They wanted something that felt different enough to justify a change in voting. And Jokic doesn't reinvent himself loudly enough to satisfy that urge. That same dynamic reappeared the following year with Shea, like I said. Jokic arguably played the most refined basketball of his career. Less waste, fewer forced possessions, more patience, more precision. But by that point, the discourse had already shifted. The standard had moved. Now it wasn't just about being the best. It was about being the best in a way that felt new. Which is a dangerous precedent, because if awards are supposed to measure impact, not novelty, then Jokic's case doesn't weaken over time. It strengthens. Realistically, if voter bias didn't exist, if fatigue didn't factor in, Jokic would be staring down a stretch that looks closer to 6 MVPs than 3. That sounds outrageous until you ask yourself who else has been more valuable to their team over that span. And that's where things get quiet. This is why Jokic still carries an underdog energy, even after winning everything there is to win. He doesn't fit the archetype. He doesn't reinforce our expectations. So the league keeps searching for ways to contextualize him without fully crowning him. And that hesitation is telling. A good clip that reinforces this idea is from this season, actually. Before I show it, let me ask you, when defending a player, is it more beneficial to let them score willingly, or to stop their scoring but they have S-tier passing? Clippers coach said this after a game against the Nuggets.
Our game plan was to, make him score and just take away his passing, take everybody else out of the game. I thought the first half we did a good job with that. We knew Jamal Murray would be more aggressive in the second half. But I didn't think he would score 55. He made some threes. He plays like a guard when Zoo is on him, pin downs and all that stuff, which is tough for Zoo to try to navigate through. Then when he goes smaller on him, he just post up. And then so it's just a tough cover, but I didn't think it would get 55. But
You are telling me that Denver has a player so good that your strategy for defense is to let him score? Then he drops 55 points with almost a triple-double anyway. Yet people somehow still get uncomfortable when we say that he is the best player in the world. On the court, though, there's no denying it. Defenses throw everything at him. Early help, late help, switching, zoning, crowding the paint, staying home on shooters. Jokic doesn't panic. He doesn't rush reads. He doesn't force outcomes. He lets the defense choose how it wants to lose. If they double early, the ball moves. If they wait, he shoots comfortably. If they switch, he finds the smallest advantage and leans on it until it breaks. If they overplay passing lanes, someone cuts behind them and Jokic already knows where that cut is going. Every defensive decision becomes a question with a built-in consequence. And Jokic never looks surprised by the answer. What makes this even more unsettling is how sustainable it all feels. Most dominant players carry an expiration date. We talk about windows. We talk about decline. We talk about how long the body can keep up with the demands being placed on it. Jokic's game doesn't rely on speed. It doesn't depend on lift. It doesn't require repeated bursts of maximal effort. It's built on touch, strength, spatial awareness, and timing. Those things age differently, which means the version of Jokic we're watching now might not be close to the end of its usefulness. That's not comforting for the rest of the league. After the championship run, the excuses disappeared. He did it against elite defenses. He did it against physical teams. He did it in games that mattered, in moments that usually expose weaknesses. And instead of changing his approach, Jokic doubled down on it. More patience, more trust in reads, more willingness to let the game come to him. That's not complacency. That's confidence. The thing about Jokic is that he doesn't announce control. He doesn't perform it. He doesn't sell it. He just takes it. Quietly, possession by possession. Sometimes it's a post-up that feels inevitable. Sometimes it's a pass that looks obvious only after it gets there. Sometimes it's nothing you can clip at all, just the other team slowly losing oxygen. You'll glance up late in the third quarter and realize Denver's been running the game for 10 straight minutes. No drama, no spike, no warning. That's not accidental. That's someone who understands timing better than everyone else on the floor. And yet, the underdog thing never quite goes away. Not because Jokic isn't respected. He is. Players know, coaches know, defenders definitely know the second he starts backing them down. But the conversation around him still feels like it's catching up, like people are uncomfortable calling him what he clearly is. I think a lot of that is aesthetic. He doesn't look like what we expect the best player to look like. He doesn't sell dominance. He doesn't even seem interested in being seen doing it. That sounds shallow. It's not. It matters more than we admit. And this is where the MVP stuff comes in, because you can't really separate the two. Jokic has won multiple MVPs. Everyone knows that. But he's also had seasons where he was clearly the most valuable player in the league and didn't win. Not because someone outplayed him, but because people were tired of the idea. That's not hindsight. That's how it sounded in the moment. You could hear the shift. The conversation stopped being about what was happening on the court and started being about what it meant. History, legacy, comfort. That's bias. Not loud, not malicious, just human. Nikola Jokic is the MVP of the past decade. Point blank, period. Looking at his on and off plus or minus, this shows that over the past few years, Jokic has essentially carried his team on his back. The Nuggets are not necessarily bad without Jokic, but according to the stats, they are one of the, if not the, worst team in the league without Jokic on the court. But somehow, they are the best or second best team in the league when he is on the court. Now that is how you tell who the most valuable player is. So where does that leave the rest of the conversation? It forces us to ask better questions. How does Jokic's control compare to Giannis when games slow down and transition points dry up? How does it stack against Embiid when defensive schemes tighten and whistles get swallowed? How does it compare to Luka when the offense has to be built from scratch every possession? Who actually sits at the top of the European big man hierarchy when the discussion moves beyond raw production and into influence? And on the MVP front, how should we think about players like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? Should Shai win MVPs if his season is special, even if Jokic's is historically efficient again? What are we really rewarding? Those questions aren't designed to tear anyone down. They're meant to sharpen the conversation. Because what we're watching right now isn't just another great season. It's a sustained stretch of basketball intelligence, efficiency, and control that doesn't have an obvious comparison point. And the strangest part is how quickly we've normalized it. A Jokic triple-double barely moves the needle anymore. A 40-point night feels like a footnote. A game where he controls every meaningful possession just blends into the weekly schedule. That's not because it's less impressive. It's because we've adjusted our expectations upward without realizing it. Which brings this full circle. Nikola Jokić is the best player in the world. He has been for a while. And somehow, he's still framed like he needs to prove it again. That disconnect between what's happening on the floor and how it's talked about is the real story. And it's not done yet, because coming up, we still have to ask who really leads the European Big Three, what greatest of all time even means in a league evolving this fast, and whether the MVP conversation is actually keeping pace with reality or just chasing the next new feeling. Those are the next conversations, and they're long overdue.